I was, watching, studying corporate media, like I always do, to see what the empire is talking about, to see what the empire wants us to talk about, to see the lies of the empire, all of that good stuff. And I stumbled across this next video. I was surprised that they were surprised, or I found it humorous. Let's put it that way, because this segment is saying, how Obama was like, this is on the ballot, freedom is on the ballot, democracy is on the ballot. This segment is saying memory is on the ballot, and it's because the polls are indicating that people view the Trump presidency as a better time in their lives than the Biden presidency. And it's coming out in poll after poll. It's coming out that people believe that Trump can do better on the economy and a bunch of other things, do better on a bunch of other things. I don't want to go list each one. And it came across this, and it's an article. I have the article right here. There's an article that we're going to be covering that is a sister to this. Where is it? Donald Trump's amnesia advantage. He has an advantage in the polls because people have forgotten about his presidency. That's what this article is about. And this segment I want to play brings on the writer of the article to talk about it. Listen to some of the stuff they said. This is more like funny, ha ha ha. This is not going to be deep analysis. This is just a surface level analysis of how shocked the establishment is about the poll numbers they're seeing.
And Susan, your latest piece for The New Yorker is titled Donald Trump's Amnesia Advantage Gets at What You Were Just Talking About. Susan writes, in part, the American presidency is the ultimate easy target, whether high gas prices due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine or post-pandemic inflation at the grocery store. Biden absorbed the outrage, while the mitigating steps taken by his administration have not redounded to his credit. Susan continues, the incumbency bind is a real problem for Biden in 2024. So, too, is the political amnesia powering the increasingly absurd arguments from Trump and his enablers about how he'd better handle everything from Israel and Ukraine to the border. Forgetting Trump's own memory lapses and those of the broader electorate is one of the former president's political superpowers. You could add to that list, I know you write about this too, Susan, January 6th, the rewriting of history around that, what he did around the 2020 election. Donald Trump, still sort of like he did in 2016, wants to be the white knight riding in to save a country in decline, forgetting the fact that he was right there in the middle of it for 4 years, adding to it.
Yeah, I'm pretty blown away. When you look at some of these numbers, it is just extraordinary. It's as if the country, a large part of the country has lost its collective mind, really. I mean.
So what we've been seeing, and it's a lot of activity going on, is because of these numbers. The numbers in the polls are not changing. And just earlier this week, or was it earlier last week, late last week, another poll came out from the Wall Street Journal. These poll numbers are not changing. The swing states, he's still underwater. In all 6 out of the 7 swing states, one of the swing states he's tied in. And they're just astonished by these numbers. And then when they go deep, the numbers on everything from immigration to the economy to Israel-Hamas war to Ukraine, everything except for abortion. This is why you see them talk about abortion just out of the blue. It's like, what was the subject? Just abortion. That's the only thing they're not underwater on. Everything else. So when she says, the United States, you guys have lost your collective minds when they're looking at these numbers because their propaganda is not penetrating. This is why they're going after TikTok. This is why we have the Twitter files. They're the old way of them propagandizing the population is not effective. It's not as effective on the young population, and they've lost the narrative control. And that's why she's saying there's a large segment of the American population that have collectively lost their fucking mind. Let me go back a little bit so she can say that funny part again. Here we go.
Do it.
Yeah, I'm pretty blown away. When you look at some of these numbers, it is just extraordinary. It's as if the country, a large part of the country, has lost its collective mind, really. I mean, you see Donald Trump going up in polls on every sort of criteria. For example, leadership qualities. Is he capable of managing the country well in a crisis? It's literally like, did all of America just sleep through 2020? Did they forget this?
No, is that we're living through a Biden administration and we can see the difference. That's what's happening. People can see that Joe Biden is terrible. People can see that Joe Biden is involved in a new war in Ukraine, is involved in a new quote unquote war in Israel, is about to be involved with a war with China, is about to be in a war in the Middle East. This wasn't happening with Trump, and Trump is terrible. But that's what's being reflected in the numbers.
This. And what I'm struck by is that it's across the board. We're talking about Israel right now. And increasingly, I hear, as I'm sure you do, from many people, especially many young people who are not even famous.
Let me rewind this. When I paused it, it was mid-sentence. I wanted her to start and say that full sentence. Let me just go back to right about here.
Struck by is that it's across the board. We're talking about Israel right now. And increasingly, I hear, as I'm sure you do, from many people, especially many young people who are not even fans of Donald Trump. Well, what really is the difference between the two parties? I mean, what is the...
And that question blows her mind. That we're at a point where young people on TikTok, for example, they're saying, what is the fucking difference between the parties? There is none. Not just young people, but people are waking up. And like I said, this from the pandemic up until now, this has been a great awakening of the fallacy that this is a democracy, that this is a representative government, that we are the good guys. There's a awakening that's happening, and I'm hoping that RBN is part of it. I'm going to rewind it. I got to hear this one more time. It is astonishing. This is astonishing. This is the reaction of the establishment when they say, what is the difference between the parties? Because to them, it's like all the years of work I've done, and to make sure you understand that, or for you to believe in the mirage that there's a Grand Canyon difference for us to be here means all that work for what?
You see Donald Trump going up in polls on every sort of criteria. For example, leadership qualities. Is he capable of managing the country well in a crisis? It's literally like, did all of America just sleep through 2020? Did they forget this? And what I'm struck by is that it's across the board. We're talking about Israel right now. And increasingly, I hear, as I'm sure you do, from many people, especially many young people who are not even fans of Donald Trump. Well, what really is the difference between the two parties? I mean, what is the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump? And I think, how is it even possible that this is the conversation we're having in 2024? It's a remarkable thing, but I think you have to look at memory itself as on the ballot in...
Memory itself is on the ballot. Now, I pause it here. I'm going to let it play again. But this is the numbers that she's talking about here. Is there more? Okay, so let's go to right there. These are the numbers that she's talking about that is astonishing to the establishment, because they don't understand why their propaganda doesn't work anymore. And that is essentially because young people, or it doesn't work as effectively on young people because young people don't watch TV. They don't watch none of that nonsense. They know it's garbage. And the format, people don't wait for time. I got to wait till 4 to watch this. No, young people on demand. When I want to watch it, I'm going to go watch it. So, and TV doesn't provide that. That's why it's very is very not user friendly, to put it that way. But look at these numbers. Manage effectively. It says changes in presidential character rating. Donald Trump. He's gone up in manage effectively. He's gone up in likability. He's gone up in good judgment. He's gone up in decisive leader. He's gone down and cares about my needs. He's gone down in honesty and trustworthiness. So let's go back just a little bit, and then we let her finish here.
Trump. And I think, how is it even possible that this is the conversation we're having in 2024? It's a remarkable thing, but I think you have to look at memory itself as on the ballot in our elections this fall.
Caddy, it is extraordinary, this phenomenon of Trump amnesia. It's been written about. There's been some studies about it, and certainly just day-to-day conversations. People are like, oh, no, it wasn't that bad, or oh, this happened. I was like, no. And people don't remember. So my question to you is, what challenge does pose us as journalists, in terms of reminding people, providing necessary context, fact-checking? Because
you hear what he just said? What challenge does it pose for us as journalists? If you're a journalist, it doesn't pose anything towards you. If you are a journalist. But if you are a propagandist, which is what he means to say. Because it's not a journalist's job to make people believe what they're writing. It's only a journalist's job to report it. That's it. That's where your job as a journalist ends. Now, when you go into saying what I report must be believed, you are now a propagandist. Especially when you're saying what I report and what you report is lies. So what he's asking, but he's using the words journalist, what he's asking is, what do we do as propagandists to combat this? People not falling in line with the establishment narrative. Yeah, we're getting rid of TikTok, but young people still aren't watching TV. Let's listen to the rest of the conversation.
Because when you do so, you're often accused by the other side, in this case, Republicans, conservatives, in a bad faith way of being biased. Well, why are you talking about January 6th all the time? Why are you talking about this? Why are you doing this? You're just trying to sway people's opinions. So what's the right approach here?
God, I wish I had the answer. I mean, I really do, because I think Donald Trump has always been one of the most tricky politicians, if we call him that, figures to cover. Right from 2015, when he came down the escalator and he got a huge amount of attention, a huge amount of free airtime, partly because he was new, he was newsworthy, right? He was a different kind of politician. He was someone running for the presidency who had never been elected before, who said extraordinary things that were right outside of the political mainstream. And then I think after he left office, part of the reason for the amnesia was that we'd gone through 4 years of government by chaos. I mean, that was the way Trump operated. It was, for all of us journalists who covered it every day, it was sort of exhausting. And I think for the country, there was that as well. I mean, poll after poll showed us that people were exhausted by the Trump presidency. Even people who were big supporters of Donald Trump found it very tiring and found the level of exhaustion high. So perhaps that's why people wanted to forget. We just, we didn't want to go back to thinking about all that tiredness and the stress of covering that time. And I think today we're facing, MSNBC and NBC have just gone through this own version of this questioning with the hiring and then the firing of Ronna McDaniel. How do we give voice to the dissatisfaction that people who support Donald Trump feel in a legitimate, respectful way, whilst also calling out lies around something like an election that was not stolen and people who went to prison after January the 6th because they committed crimes. So I think we just have to be clear in our own mind and in every case treat every single incident on its own merits. And is this truth? Is this not truth? In a world of disinformation, that becomes even harder, whilst not dismissing millions of people's grievances who have legitimate grievances and things they're unhappy about who may vote for Donald Trump.
That was a fun clip. So instead of amnesia, maybe Joe Biden's doing so bad because of this. Democrats fear Netanyahu may have undermined Biden's image among voters. Maybe they're seeing a genocider supporter in action and people don't like it. Maybe that's what's making Donald Trump look appealing to people, because he's not the one actively committing a genocide. Maybe. Even though he will be the one actively, if he's elected, doing the same thing. So let me read a snippet from here. When the Israeli-Hamas war broke out 6 months ago, it represented the kind of global crisis that President Joe Biden told voters he is uniquely equipped to confront. But as the U.S. struggled to prevent the conflict from spiraling into a humanitarian catastrophe, some of Biden's close advisors and allies began worrying that rather than bolstering his image as an experienced global leader, the president's steadfast support for Israel's offensive risks further complicating his argument that the election is a choice between his competent moral clarity and former President Donald Trump's chaos. That's out the window, because you can't call out Donald Trump's immorality while you're supporting a genocide. You see how that disarms your argument that you are the moral one when you are supporting a genocide? So maybe it's not amnesia. Maybe it's the support of genocide, Joe Biden. Biden's defenders also note that Trump has given voters a real-time glimpse of how he would handle such a crisis, criticizing Netanyahu and calling the militant group Hezbollah very smart just days after October 7th attack. Do you want me to vote for Donald Trump? Because Hezbollah is pretty based. So what are you talking about? And Hezbollah will be, and Hezbollah is the military arm of Lebanon. Hezbollah will be at the front lines of the Palestinian resistance, armed Palestinian resistance. Those episodes, on top of an extensive first-term record of erratic foreign policy decision-making, have given voters a clear sense of which candidate is more prepared to navigate complex crisis. They argue. Still, there is a persistent worry in Democratic circles that the visceral images emerging from Gaza each day are denting enthusiasm among Biden voters. Most visibly, the worsening humanitarian situation has angered an important part of the Biden base, young voters, Arab and Muslim Americans and progressives. Outraged by the U.S. inability to stop the unfolding horror, Biden now faces protests nearly everywhere he travels, as well as concerns that a Democratic convention this summer will be consumed by voter anger in the streets. This next article is talking about the convention. Democratic tensions over Israel threaten to boil over at convention. So this is what the previous article was talking about when it referred to the worries that people are so discontent with what's happening that it's going to boil over in the convention. It's too late. There's going to be protests outside the convention. Can you imagine what it's going to look like? Thousands of people down there protesting outside the convention. Then there'll be people inside too. We're currently trying to get inside the convention. The post-duopoly show people. We're trying to meet in Chicago. Kit is already out there. And then report and disrupt. But let's read a little bit of this article too. The debate within the Democratic Party over Israel could come to a head this summer at its convention as it faces a significant intra-party divide on how to approach the ongoing conflict. Members of the party critical of U.S. support for Israel amid its war with Hamas has rallied around the movement to buck President Biden in the Democratic primaries and vote uncommitted as a protest vote against him. The movement has seen moderate success and attained some delegates to be sent to the convention, which will be held in Chicago in August. Some Democrats are concerned that the division on display will just grow worse ahead of the, I don't know what that is, process of approving the party's official platform this summer. They're afraid it's going to be chaos, similar to the chaos when it was the Vietnam War and they had the Democratic Convention. Here's a quote. I do think at the convention, for sure, I would be really surprised if there weren't significant protests on this issue. And unfortunately, I don't think there is a lot that Biden can do between now and then to change that, said Heather, a member of the 2020 Democratic Platform Drafting Committee.